Minister Fikile Mbalula actually called on public transport stakeholders to do their part and prevent the spread of the virus. Now, the taxi industry, which commutes over 16 million people, is already creating awareness, disinfecting vehicles and distributing sanitizers to drivers. So to tell us more about what the bus services are doing, we're joined on the line now by Bazil, Govender, who's Executive Manager of the Southern African Bus Operators Association, or SABOA. Bazil, good afternoon, rather good morning. Thanks so much for speaking to us. Now, we heard the interventions from the Taxi Association. What sort of conversations have you been having with bus operators?
Morning, Sakina. Yeah, thanks for having us. Look, the bus sector is responsible for about 26% of all public transport commuter trips, and on an annual basis, about 450 million trips per annum. The services are wide-ranging, urban, rural, deep rural, so it's commendable that once the call from the President and the interministerial task team was placed on the national agenda, the bus companies immediately kicked in and started with various measures, essentially threefold: promoting awareness and education around the virus, stressing the need for personal and individual responsibility for basic hygiene, and at the same time elevating cleansing and sanitizing of buses. All of that obviously balanced with strategies to ensure business continuity. But the primary focus has been on safety and minimizing the risk and the spread of the virus. One thing that's come through consistently from all our operators and members is the challenge posed by the lack of availability of gloves, masks, and a general or almost chronic shortage of alcohol-based sanitizers that's really impacting on the ability to consistently keep the standards.
So what sort of measures will your members be putting in place? Because one would imagine that the numbers of commuters who use bus services, especially at a time like this, to travel to different destinations across the country would be slightly elevated. You've got schools closing, and one would imagine people have already made those bookings. So what sort of measures have they put in place to deal with that, and also some of the restrictions that government have now placed on all of us?
Sakina, as I indicated, from Monday onwards already, bus operators have actively been communicating via pamphlets, social media. SABOA has also put out a news press release yesterday. So we're in constant contact with the daily commuter base. The problem around travel, though, is it needs direction from government in terms of restrictions or not, because that has complications. Most, if not a large part of public transport is done on a contractual basis with the government. We have made detailed proposals. We've met with the National Department of Transport. We've made detailed proposals, and we're led to believe that those proposals, amongst others, are being taken up today for presentation at the interministerial meeting. And we will look to see from there on what the department proposes as a uniform or consistent approach. But be assured, and we want to assure the public from SABOA's perspective of representing the bus industry, that all measures that are possible have already been implemented. Drivers, where possible, have been issued with masks and sanitizers. The cleaning teams have been given heightened awareness and focus in terms of sanitizing buses, and it will be an ongoing process. It's not just a quick once-off. This is happening, has been happening from Monday, and will continue to happen ongoing.
And what about the number of commuters who will be using bus services? Will that be restricted to 50 as per the directive issued?
We're not aware of a directive being issued in terms of the public transport formally, but that in itself poses other challenges. As I've said, most of the commuter bus services are operated on behalf of transport authorities. So these specifically relate to provinces, and there are strict contracting conditions attached to these operations. But during the meeting with the National Department of Transport earlier in the week, we have tabled ways to do restrictions or impose restrictions and implement them, not without pain, because that brings about delays, the requirement for additional resources and additional trips. But effectively to do this, there needs to be permission and authority from the transport contracting authorities, and we await the government response on that. And we hope that is one of the things that will come out of today's meeting, so it can be formally communicated and implemented.
Now, Bazil, we do know that some of the operators travel across borders and some of the restrictions that have come into play there. How are your members going to deal with that?
The borders that were closed are primarily mostly the smaller border posts, and they generally have low levels of commercial and public transport traffic. The borders that we're mainly operating through would be the Swaziland, Lesotho, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, and Namibian borders. These borders remain open and people still travel through them. And it's difficult at this stage to make a call on the direct impact on this sector of the industry. But related agencies like the Crossborder Agency and entities like SABC, which is an association of the cross-border bus operators, are meeting and also engaging with operators and implementing similar, if not specific, measures around sanitization, communication, education, and awareness.
So just to bottom line it, for commuters who are still planning on traveling, where can they get information on the intervention so that they are aware and can perhaps prepare themselves better to be more efficient in taking up the travel that they plan on doing?
Sakina, it's critical that people access the correct platforms, first, second, and third tier. So most often, an individual would use public transport that is linked to a specific company. Those specific companies are all geared to direct and receive communication with their immediate customer base. So for example, if a passenger uses Golden Arrow or Patco, that would be the immediate contact. However, and these companies, however big or small, are all geared to deal with communications and deal with their customer base. But from a broader perspective, SABC will be constantly updating all the platforms available. So the public are free to access SABC via the traditional communication channels, that's the website, Twitter, and Facebook, and or on telephone to SABC on 011 511 7641, and we will channel specific queries to specific companies as and when required.
Well, thanks for your time. Bazil Govender is the Executive Manager of the Southern African Bus Operators Association, or SABC, talking to us about the bus services interventions and people's traveling to different destinations during this time. And it's vitally important that you get in touch with the provider that you will be using, because they will be giving us a sense of, or you or I or us, a sense of exactly what sort of new measures they will be implementing. Right. That takes care of that. Now, of course, over